Okay. We are back, Senate Gov Ops on April 11th. We're shifting gears, working on H 875 on the State Commission, Ethics Commission and Code of Ethics. We have with us the Executive Director of the Ethics Commission, Christine, if you want to join us at the table? Sure. Thank you. So we have walked through the bill and gotten a sort of first introduction. Sorry, that chair is low. Yeah, it's even shorter than usual. Yeah, I'm sorry. You might want to find a new chair.
Do you pick up my coat, Chris? I could pass.
And musical chairs. Is that better? What's better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Bob, Senator Norris. All right, so so you're our first actual witness. We've just done a walkthrough, so, and I know that the House has done a ton of work on the bill, so why don't you take it away, tell us what you want us to know.
Sure. So, first thing that I will point out is that it's a very long bill. Sorry. Christina Severett. I'm from the Ethics Commission, the Executive Director of the State Ethics Commission. I've been in that position for about 2.5 years. And I should also introduce TJ Jones. So TJ Jones is a consultant who's worked with the Ethics Commission for 5 or 6 years long before, pretty much since its inception, before I was there. So
Connecticut.
Yes, he's the former state ethics prosecutor for Connecticut for 10 years. He was the first ethics prosecutor, stayed there for 10 years. He is now on the state ethics board for Connecticut, and he's also a professor at UConn. And so he serves as our national expert when it comes to national practices when it comes to ethics. So, I mean, he serves a lot of roles, but that's one of his areas of expertise.
Excellent.
Okay. So, yes, this bill that is before you, H 875, it used to be 2 bills. There was 2 bills when it was considered in the House, and then during the last week, it was mashed into one very large ethics bill. So I know it looks like a lot, but it's actually considered in 2 separate parts. And then also a lot of what it contains is existing language from the state code of ethics and so forth. The conversation in the House, the most recent conversation really revolved around municipal ethics. So I thought that might be a good place to start, unless you prefer that I start somewhere else. Also because it seems like most of the witnesses that are here today are prepared to talk about municipal ethics. And also because this comes out of a proposed municipal ethics framework. So we were tasked with drafting a report for the legislature last year on what municipal ethics should look like in Vermont in terms of a framework. Because right now we pretty much have nothing in place. We don't have many standards at the state level. And have no avenue of recourse for people who want to file complaints. And so that is really, I think, one of the push behind this proposal is the fact that since the inception of the Ethics Commission in 2017, the need to address municipal ethics in some way was recognized then. So I know people testified in favor of giving the Ethics Commission jurisdiction over municipal ethics at the time. I know Secretary of State Jim Condos also raised this as an issue that he thought this was one of the most important things to do. I believe at that time, the decision was made to do data collection. So the Secretary of State's office collected data on the number of ethics inquiries that our office received. Obviously, at that time, there was no code of ethics in place, so their definition of ethics might be a bit different from what we would consider, an ethics complaint. But since that time, from what I've heard from them, which is documented in our annual report each year, they've received, in the high 60s to 90 complaints or inquiries related to ethics each year. Our office also receives a number of municipal ethics complaints, even though we don't have jurisdiction. About 25% of our complaints filed with us are related to municipal ethics. 50% of our complaint inquiries are related to municipal ethics this year. And we also get a number of inquiries and requests for advice from municipal officials asking if we can help them with ethics questions. We also have people take our online training, even though some boards have said required that their board members take our training because they need one, even though they understand that they're not covered by the state code of ethics. So that's kind of where we are now, is trying to find a path forward so that we have a way to assist municipalities with their ethics questions, their need to have like a source for advice, and also we're looking at, complaint first. I will say and acknowledge that this bill does not provide an independent complaint mechanism for municipal complaints. I do understand that the members of the public that we hear from are not going to be happy with that. It's just not something that we could do in this bill. We feel like that's going to be something that takes time. There's a process that involved looking at what that's going to look like. So what we have tried to do in our proposal is look at what the Ethics Commission does now, what the needs are that we are hearing from people who call our office and what best national practices are. So the way we approached this proposal was to do research, and TJ here was the lead point person on doing the research, looking at national best practices. So we narrowed it down to a certain number of states that we felt were similar to Vermont, and Southie that they're fellow New England states or also small states. We looked at what they do. We looked at what the need is in terms of what our people are asking us for. So they're coming to us with a request for ethics advice, but there is no, municipal state code of ethics like there is the state code of ethics. So we're trying to give them advice. It's very general, but at the same time, we can't actually give them advice, right? So if we're giving them advice, we're trying to be as helpful as we possibly can while explaining to them, we don't have jurisdiction over municipal ethics. Yes, it does sound like you have conflict of interest. This is how you might want to handle it, but we can't really do this on an official level. We're not putting things in writing. We're not giving them advice or opinions. And same when it comes to people who call us with municipal complaints, they're like, where can I go? I've tried this with municipality. Can you help me? I have to explain, no. We don't have jurisdiction over municipal ethics. Have you tried the Secretary of State's office? Yes, I've tried them. They can't do anything. Have you tried Vermont League of Cities and Towns? Yes, we've tried them. They can't do anything for us. We're a member of the public. Have you called your legislator? So there's basically like this group of four. I think that a lot of municipal calls that get passed amongst us. So we're trying to find a solution. How can we provide advice? How can we resolve municipal complaints? So we did this research phase, and then we had listening sessions. And so that is when we heard from members of the public and municipal officials. So we approached this by advertising it throughout the state. We did it in BT Digger, we did it in 7 days, and we did it in French Fork Forum. We also sent notification to Secretary of State's office, Vermont League of Cities and Towns to share with everyone who wanted to participate. And so we wanted to hear from members of the public, what are your issues with municipal ethics? What do you think the pathway forward is? So when we were finished with that process, we put together a proposal, which I think you all have. We submitted it in January to the legislature as a whole with some recommendations. And the recommendations that came out of that were, a lot of things in front of me, so I apologize if it takes me a moment to pull it up.
Hold on just 1 second. Did we post that? Okay, perfect. Go ahead, Christine.
Okay. So our recommendations are that the General Assembly should act a uniform code of ethics applicable to all elected and appointed municipal officials. For consistency and interpretive purposes, the terms and definitions of such uniform code should closely adhere to the state code of ethics, which has been vetted and tested in the Vermont context, with some adjustments to accommodate unique situations faced by municipalities. So I will say that when we get calls from municipalities and comparing them to calls that we get related to the state code of ethics, they're pretty much all the same subject matter. So we're not dealing with very unique situations. We're not having municipalities call us with a unique set of facts that isn't something that we don't come across in other contexts. Okay.
Okay, just a quick question
Go
for
ahead,
you on that. So when you say 50% of your complaints, 50% of your complaints are ethics complaints, what is that number? Is that 1 out of 2 complaints? Is that 50 out of 100 complaints? Well, you were saying 50% of your complaints were.
This year, so in the past, like the first 3 months of this year, so they're complaint inquiries and then there are complaints. So this year we've had, I think, about 14 complaint inquiries, and 50% of those would be municipal ethics. Last year we had a total of 29 complaint inquiries. Complaint inquiries are different from complaints. So complaints are fill out the form, file it with us. We don't cover municipal ethics, so sometimes people just don't kind of read our website and they submit the complaint anyway. So that's why we kind of have a smaller number of municipal complaints
7 out of 14 presently is what you're
this
saying?
year, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll say that if we're looking across over years, so we're looking at complaints for when the first year I was here, we had 3 complaints that year. The next year we had a total of 15 complaints last year. This year so far, we've had 10 complaints just in the first 3.5 months of the year. So every year it is increasing. The nature of the complaints don't change. I think it's just an awareness issue. People know we exist now.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Go ahead. Sam.
tag on to that. So the nature of the complaints don't change. They're fairly uniform in their nature.
Yeah.
And are you going to share with us what they are?
Generally, they rely on conflicts of interest, preferential treatment, misuse of position, misuse of resources, and that's across state government and municipal government. With municipal government, we get a lot of questions about public records law and open meeting law, and we get a lot of questions about financial discrepancies and where they can report that. Right now, we've noticed there's a real gap because there's a growing number of people who call us. It's usually not just one issue. It's like, open meeting law and public records act are mixed in with financial discrepancies. please don't find it with conflict of interest. And so we are getting an increasing number of people who are calling to ask about financial discrepancies. Those things don't fall under, the proposed code of ethics, but just to give you a sense of what's out there.
So in terms of what does fall under our code of ethics, conflict of interest.
Preferential treatment, misuse of positions, use of resources.
Thanks.
Okay, so to assist municipalities, moving on, to assist municipalities in complying with municipal code of ethics, particularly municipalities with limited resources. So I think this is a good opportunity to point out that most of the people who call us, I'd say at least 75% are from very small municipalities, small towns. That doesn't mean that the larger cities and towns aren't represented, it's just they're represented to a lesser extent. So ethics training should be required for all municipal officials subject to the code. This is the same as it works with the state code of ethics, right? So when we implemented the state code of ethics, there's a training requirement that went with this. And the idea is that people deserve to know what kind of standards they're going to be held to. So the training that we have envisioned is basically a service that the Ethics Commission will provide. We do have limited resources, but what we did with the State Code of Ethics is we created an online training that's about an hour. So it basically gives people a taste, it gives them an overview of what's there, and then they know that they can call us if they have further questions or further advice. So we envision doing the same thing for municipalities. We'll create a free online training that anyone can take on our website. We do to improve our existing training. I'm not saying it's the most amazing and fun training. We do plan to improve it. And then they'll get it, documentation or an email, an automatic email saying they completed the training. So that's the service that we envision providing to municipalities who, to people who are required to take the training. You can take it anyway, it's not required, but that's how that would work. And that is to give people a basic understanding of what the law is that they need to adhere to. And it's for their benefit, I should say. Our proposal is not, a framework to punish people, it's to benefit people too. And so we look at the training requirement as something that is a benefit to municipalities, both the municipal officials as well as members of the public. So, and in our proposal, we suggested that the Ethics Commission be designated as an approved training provider for the Code of Ethics. And so that's the same as for the State Code of Ethics. The State Ethics Commission is one approved training provider, and there are other approved training providers. However, the way it worked is that either 4 designated training providers were the only ones who could creating training. So we are the only available training provider. I mean that House and Senate municipalities can do their own trainings and to do their own trainings, but outside of that, we developed the only training. So to further assist municipalities in complying with any municipal code of ethics, the jurisdiction of the Ethics Commission should be expanded to allow it to provide confidential ethics guidance, advice, and complaint services to municipalities. And so this is just expanding what we already do to improve people. Number 5, whistleblower protections. This came directly out of the listening sessions that we held because we do realize that people are looking for an impartial, place to file complaints. We can't offer that, but we've heard a lot about retaliation, people experiencing retaliation. Even just recently in the past 2 weeks, we've had people call us, please can you tell us what protections are in place in my town? I've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars have gone missing. We know people who've experienced retaliation. So we know there are criminal laws that protect us because they've experienced things like vandalism, things like that. And so I explained, unfortunately I have to explain there are no specific protections in place because for a lot of people to come forward in situations where there's a lot of tension in these towns, it does take a lot. And so the whistleblower protections came directly out of the listening sessions because we wanted to be able to offer something to people who come forward when there are real serious issues that they want to bring to people's attention. The whistleblower protections, I should say, basically provides, as written in the draft, injunctive relief, right? So this isn't something where somebody's going to sue their town, get $100,000. They have to be willing to get a lawyer, they're gonna have to pay for their lawyer, and they're gonna have to prove that any retaliation or negative experiences they've had are directly related to their ethics complaint. They have to file an ethics complaint, it has to be in writing. It can go to the Ethics Commission, it can go to the Attorney General's office, it can go to the Secretary of State, but they have to follow this path where they have raised the issue, they've shown that they've raised the issue, and they have to be able to connect whatever negative experiences they're having back to that ethics complaint. So it's not perfect, but it's something. So this is what we thought we could do to offer people a level of protection who want to move forward and try and, promote good government. Their last recommendation was that each municipality should appoint an ethics liaison to coordinate with the Ethics Commission with respect to training and administration of the ethics code in the municipality. Municipal liaisons will expedite and the ability of the commission to provide education, training, and advice to the appropriate officials in each municipality. So there's been a lot of confusion about what the ethics liaison actually is, and I think people got the wrong end of the stick thinking that municipalities are gonna have to hire somebody new. This is a very, very basic position, which is basically you're serving as the point of contact, you are the email address. So when the ethics commission says we've received a complaint, where are we gonna send it? Okay, we have an email address for that municipality. When we created training, we have a new resource available, we want to email municipalities and we want to say, well, we have a new training available, we send it out. It's basically you're serving as a point of contact for a lister. That's what that is.
Senator Buosi.
So that could, in many towns or cities, be the town manager or the select board chair, or it doesn't.
Anyway.
We're not standing up a whole position that has to.
Yeah.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion about that. I think the word, appointing ethics liaison, maybe people think they actually have to appoint a new position. No, just, whoever it is in your town is gonna be appropriate to receive emails from the ethics commission. So that we have a way to contact you. So that comes to the end of our recommendations that are actually written to the proposal that informs the draft that we submitted to the House. So we submitted 2 drafts to the House. One was just a modification of the state code of ethics. The other was more tailored to municipalities. The House decided to go with the one that was more tailored to municipalities. So that is the one that was discussed and not the other. And so I came up with a quick summary because I know that there is a lot in there. And if you would like, I can go through the quick summary.
Do we,
We have a summary from them on this, don't we?
We have a summary of the bill. So you have a summary of
to Magali?
of your recommendation. Yeah, this is Olivia.
I'm sorry.
No,
You know what?
Believe me, at least you called her a name. I just blanked the other one.
Oh, that's true. But
And your written testimony, you submitted that also, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's, so yeah, this should be on our website.
This just really distills what's in the bill as it relates to municipal ethics. So that was, basically our proposal that informed the draft bill, what I just discussed. And if you want to see, we had surveys and we accepted public comments during listening sessions, and those are also summarized in the proposal that we put forward if you want to look at that. So there's a lot of comments, the results of the survey are in the proposal that should also be on the website.
Yeah, in the listening sessions, I went to 2 of them and they were pretty well attended and very helpful to hear the sort of scope of what people are talking about out there.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to one of them. How many, if I may ask, how many comments did you get?
80 something. So we had people who submitted written comments, and then it would be like around 15 or 16, and then we had a survey that was online, and we had a place for people who fill out the survey could provide written comments as well. So it's in the high 80s.
And the survey went to all select boards or?
The survey was on our website and it was advertised in conjunction with the listening sessions.
So people had to go to it to get, okay. And I guess my fundamental question, which maybe you answered and I missed. Just as possible, is why is our state code of ethics insufficient to apply to everybody?
I mean, I would say that it is insufficient. I think that
But it is.
insufficient.
Do you think it is or is?
I think there's 2 options. I think you could take the state code of ethics and apply it to municipal law.
Yeah, I do too. So I'm just curious why we have to go this step further. I mean, I'm interested they did, but I'm.
And some states do that. Rhode Island, which is really highly rated in terms of its approach to ethics, that's the approach that they take. I think that when we were looking at the code, I think people felt like it was unduly burdensome. I think when we discussed the code of ethics and adopting state code, you were there. So there was understanding that it was very, very basic, right? But I think when people look at it and they aren't familiar with it, they see it as it being very lengthy and potentially very burdensome, which it is not. But it did have some provisions in it that people were uncomfortable with applying to municipalities, such as, employment restrictions on outside employment, things like that. So those were removed from the state code of ethics.
So it's been simplified
Yes,
for
it's
the
been,
municipality.
yes, there are fewer provisions in it in the state code of ethics.
I guess we would have to know the conflict of interest complaints to know how related to employment they are, because many of the small town complaints I have received as a senator have all been related to, sadly, it's also election, who's been elected and who has been hired. So they're often employment related, but they aren't necessarily bigger employer, it's like who's been employed by the town.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important point because, the conflict of interest provisions are still in the code of ethics. It's just not that outside employment is not addressed separately. So when you do have a conflict of interest that relates to employment, that can still be addressed through the conflict of interest provisions. There's just not restrictions on once you leave office, there's a certain period of time that you have to wait.
Right, things like that might be less.
Sorry,
Okay, so a summary of the provisions, and I'll try and make this quick because I know, the other people want to testify, but, so we have, it requires recusal and disclosure of conflicts of interest, and that tracks the state code of, the definition of conflict of interest in the state, code of ethics, and also the recusal procedure. And so if anyone has questions about the recusal procedure, but it basically says if you have a conflict of interest and you want to continue on, and you think that under the definition and under what the code of ethics allows, you can, then that means that you have to disclose it. You have to say, I have a conflict of interest, or the appearance of one. I think that I can move forward in the matter, but I'm putting it in writing so everyone can see that I'm acknowledging this. I don't think it's a bill. I think it's purely administrative. I think I can move forward. So the public has access to that, so they understand what's going on. If you think you have a conflict of interest that requires you to recuse,
Christina, I'm sorry to interrupt. Senator Norris, did you?
I was just trying to get Senator Clarkson's attention there. She's
It got my attention.
peeling an orange.
I know, I'm trying to be thoughtful about the senator across the table from me.
Okay,
Thank you.
we're good.
I am, I'm like doing it as far away from you as I can.
We have an allergy in the room to oranges, so that's why.
I've already had one allergic reaction today, I don't need another.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm being kind of.
No, I appreciate you both.
This is a violation of.
Okay. All right, everyone. Carry on, Christina.
so if you have a conflict of interest and you are going to recuse, you do not need to put anything in writing, but you need to, make a statement publicly so other people understand that you're recusing because of a conflict. Alright, so no directing others to act unethically. You cannot direct others to do what you can't do yourself. So that just means like if you recuse yourself, you can't tell your subordinate to act on your behalf. That's an example. No participation after recusal due to conflict. So that means once you recuse yourself, you have to fully recuse. You can't, stand by the water cooler and like tell people, come over here, this is what I think. I'm trying to encourage you to vote the way that I want you to vote. Generally speaking, avoid the appearance of unethical conduct, whenever you can. No improper preferential treatment. Municipal officers should not show any favoritism or prejudice to anyone carrying out municipal work unless permitted by law, written policy, or rule. No using municipal position for improper personal or financial gain. Self-explanatory. No using municipal resources for improper financial gain. So, if you have a city car that you drive, you can't use it to drive Uber inside. Limitations on gifts to municipal officers. Municipal officers may not solicit or accept gifts when the intent of the gift is to influence the municipal officer's official actions. This deviates from state code of ethics, which is very specific gift rules. This is kind of like a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, it's actually more restrictive than the state code of ethics, but it's harder to prove because you have to prove intent. But this is like,
I hate to ask the obvious, but can you just tell us where, so we can follow along with you, what page you're on?
on page 1 of the quick summary.
Okay, so you're on, okay, good.
I need to pull it some.
And no benefiting from contracts. So this is something that does come up in a lot of calls that we have and a lot of anecdotal stories that I've been told after this, proposal came out. So municipal officers cannot personally benefit from municipal contracts executed as part of their official duties unless the benefit is no greater than that of others generally affected by the contract. The contract is an employment contract with the municipality. The contract is valued at less than $2,000, or the contract is awarded through an open and public process of competitive bidding. So it still allows, small municipalities or any municipality to actually let the municipal official join in when it's appropriate, but hopefully it puts some guardrails in place because you do hear a lot of stories about people basically self-dealing when it comes to contracts. So no objections if anyone anyway. So I do want to take the opportunity to talk about the difference between policies and laws, right? So right now there's the requirement that every municipality adopt a conflict of interest policy. That's the definition. It's not defined in statute. So there's a hierarchy of laws, and I know Senator Clarkson will remember all of this discussion from 2 years ago when we talked about why can't each branch of government just keep their own policies in place. So a policy can be changed. A policy, when you're looking to enforce it, there's a, it's at the lowest levels. We have the Constitution, we have laws, we have regulations, and we have policies. What we're looking to do here is put ethics law into place at the same level, so everyone is held to the same standards. It's easier to enforce, it's easier for everyone to understand, it's easier for people to get advice from. When you're looking at municipal government, and I'm gonna say this, and this is something that I've recently learned. I know that Vermont League of Cities and Towns is very much in favor of having each municipality adopt their own policies. That creates a conflict of interest when it comes to liability issues. So when you have a state law that creates a higher standard, that creates more opportunities for liability, you can actually hold a municipality to those standards. When you have a policy in place, not as much, right? So policies can change, policies are different standards. We've had people come to us seeking advice and told that they have been advised that they don't need to, adopt a code of ethics. And it's been, the idea behind it is if you don't adopt your own policies, then no one can hold them to you. So if you're taken to court, it reduces your level of liability. So I do really think it's important to point out that what we're trying to do here is to make enforceable standards and not try and skirt the issue of allowing municipalities to get away with things when you have problems, because not every municipality has problems, right? We only hear from the ones where there are problems. When there are problems, people don't want to adopt, a code of ethics. They don't want to adopt those policies. And we've heard of cases where, I think there's a recent one in the news where somebody, or a town or municipality adopted policy, violated it, and the next week came back and changed it so that their violation was no longer actually a violation because they changed the definition of conflict of interest.
Senator Vygotsky.
So I wonder, and it's very possible that this is exactly what the bill does, but I know what we've done, and I'm particularly thinking about certain law enforcement policy. We've had the Criminal Justice Council create model policy that is the floor, and agencies outside of there are able to do more than that, but no less than that. And I wonder if that is what we're sort of suggesting here, is that the Ethics Commission creates the floor. And if towns want to go above and beyond that, that is fine, but they must adopt the minimum.
That is exactly what it is. And I will say the legislature creating.
Or we'll do it.
So, yeah. And so it's not about, it's putting it into law, right? So municipalities don't have to do anything. Once this is passed, it will just apply to everyone. And right now you have a system where that's not the case. You have a requirement of conflict of interest policy that towns are required to adopt. Not all of them have. Just in the past couple of weeks, I heard from 2 municipalities. These aren't, very small places where they're from members of municipality trying to find the conflicts of interest policy. And I said, well, there's a requirement, so it should be there. They can't find it anymore. We don't know how many municipalities have actually done this. There's no enforcement. There's no one tracking this. We just don't know. And so that is what we are seeking to avoid here, right? We're seeking to avoid patchwork where one town has a definition of conflict of interest that doesn't match the next town over, and that doesn't match the next town hasn't actually bothered to adopt one. We want one common set of standards for everyone. And that's what we did in State Code of Ethics. So moving on, other provisions, protections for whistleblowers.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
Senator.
So, Paul, we're on enforcement. Cruise by it, but I think enforcement is the toughest thing, particularly in small towns where it's people who know each other often quite intimately. And there are all sorts of conflicts of interest involved in that, but is there nobody, this goes to our county question too, and our county task force. And I wish the LCT had a kind of a discipline board. I mean, I wish there was a municipal entity that existed for all municipalities that were go-to. I mean, there is the Ethics Commission, but you're not great for enforcement. I mean, you're not designed.
We would like to be. I would say that's
okay,
no
you'd like to-
question.
I like that too.
Well, I mean, that does make some sense, but at the moment, I'm not really. A person who receives these things, that the enforcement is, I don't know what the power of the enforcement is. They can't take away an elected person's job, can they? I mean, what are the consequences of this enforcement?
Right, so the enforcement question is one that we acknowledge in the proposal, but we said is not going to be resolved. We put forward a few different things, like you could have the ethics commission be, the enforcer. You could create a new separate state board. There's different ways to do it. You could have regional boards that hear complaints from all the cities and towns would never be appropriate because they are the insurer. 95% of municipalities according to previous testimony. So that is an inherent immediate financial conflict of interest. They could never hear complaints coming from members of the municipality. That would be completely inappropriate.
Sorry, what would be inappropriate?
For Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I think you mentioned that as a possible one. So
Well, I think Yeah.
Not for a body that hears complaints, so, okay.
And the insurer of towns.
Gosh.
So it's an open question, and I think it's one that needs to be resolved. Way that we attempt to resolve it here is we have a requirement, and this is something I haven't gotten to it yet, but with requirement that municipalities have a process in place to hear complaints. Because we went into this assuming that there has to be a way for people to at least be able to submit a complaint, and we're also operating an assumption that municipalities do have some kind of process in place, whether, somebody submits a complaint about, dispute with a neighbor or zoning issue. There has to be some way for towns to hear complaints, as it stands, but we want to make it clear that, ethics complaints need to be integrated into that system if they aren't already. So at least now there's a guaranteed place for people to submit those complaints, although we do understand that people are not going to be happy when they're told you have to file your complaint with the municipality. We understand that members of the public are not satisfied with that. We just think that that is something that is going to come a bit later.
Okay.
And I wonder, Senator, sorry, I'm just gonna follow up on Mark then, which is I wonder if there's an interim measure until they are in place that we could file them at least with you so they'd be secure.
They can be filed with us and we just have to refer them on. So it's the same way that it works at the state level. Right now, people can file complaints with us, or they can file it directly with, agency, with DHR, with the judiciary, whoever. A lot of people come to us because we are, an impartial place for them to go discuss their issue.
That's great.
It's less intimidating. And so now we review those complaints, we help them construct it if they need help, not everyone does, just to make sure that it actually falls into the code of ethics. Because there are complaints that come to us and say this is not appropriate for an ethics complaint, and we explain to them why. Like you have a policy disagreement, that's an ethics complaint. So then we refer it on to the enforcement agency. And so that's also not ideal because a lot of people, not just the complainants, but also some respondents would prefer that the ethics commission or an independent body hear the complaints because they're also not confident that they're going to get a fair shake with whoever's hearing it within their agency. But right now, that's the way it works in the state level, and that's the way it would work with municipal complaints. We would receive the complaint, would help the person understand where this fit under the municipal code of ethics, whether it fits in the municipal code of ethics, and then we would refer it on to the municipality and handle from there.
Got it, okay. Senator White has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And is it all right if I ask a general question or be in that part of the discussion?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming and testifying today. Municipal codes of ethics are very valuable, and I appreciate that there's been an absence of a place for Vermonters to go in situations where they feel that some unethical behavior is occurring. I have some concerns about this bill, in part because I worry that there is a hyper focus on local elected leaders, where there can be a use of the terms and the rhetoric of ethics to harass and to basically try to stymie policy discussion by becoming character assassination. And I'm wondering if you can just comment on that tension and if you feel the bill strikes a good balance.
Yeah, and that's an easy one because there are questions that came up. I mean, we, honestly, we had these discussions 2 years ago, so it's all
Yes,
kind of the same
that's-
issue. So that's why I'm easy to say, yes, of course I can address it.
And let me just say, the reason I ask is because there are communities who have seen this bill in our district who have come forward to say that's their perception of the bill currently. So I think it is important for you to clarify kind of that.
No, and very happy to do that. So yeah, and I think I touched on it earlier. So we do have people who call us with, they disagree with the policy decision. We explain to them that's not an ethics issue. We have in the past had people, on two sides of an issue call us in a municipality that's not Columbus happened. And they just don't agree with the decision that the select board is making. We explain to them, you disagree with the decision, but that's not an ethics issue, right? So we're taking complaints that specifically fall under the code of ethics. And where the advantage is for municipalities that are doing the right thing, it's not just a situation where we're handling, this in the context of complaints. So if a municipality can come to us with advice, we're hearing this like chatter in the community. People are accusing us of being unethical. Can you tell us that what we're doing is correct? And we can say yes. Can you tell us what should we do something to improve the way that we're operating? Yes. Okay, we are comfortable that we're doing everything correctly. Can we request an advisory opinion from you? That is something that is in writing. And so they are confidential. We remove the identifying information to the extent that people want it to be removed, but always leave the name of the people involved. But it's, confidentiality kind of lies with the requester in a lot of ways, in the sense that if you're like, no, we don't mind saying that we as the XYZ select board are coming, as body to ask you if we're doing the right thing, then we can say that, and then that can be in writing, and then we can use that to kind of push back and say, we understand this is a controversial decision, but people are, saying we're behaving unethically, we have checked with the State Ethics Commission, we have this in writing, and hopefully that will.
Yes, thank you. That's actually a really important point, because one of the ways I think some of the discussions kind of spiral is there is no place for people to get clarity. So people can kind of allude to things and kind of build this false narrative. And so I really appreciate that. Are those legal? They're not legal opinions.
Or not legally.
So, okay. Can you also, then my last question is, can you explain the interplay between FOIA in this discussion? Because what I think has been used as a tool by certain individuals who disagree with policy discussions is to ask for lots of documentation. And a municipality has to pay both in time and physical copies sometimes, to adhere to those FOIA requests. So do you get access to documents to come up with an opinion? Can you say actually a FOIA, like how does that interplay?
Yeah, so Secretary of State's office is the one who kind of is the place where, open meeting law advice is housed. So, the interplay with this would be, I suppose that if somebody wanted to file a complaint, they're always free to, make a public records request.
Okay.
And include that in their complaint, which would then go back to, the municipality. Open meeting law is really only, or the Records Act is really only addressed in this draft as part of like training requirements.
Okay.
And so this came up during discussions with the House, because initially the point of the training is to provide training specifically on the state and local code of ethics, not generally speaking, just ethics overall, but specifically the municipal state code of ethics, so people understand what the law is now. Many of the calls we get relate to open meeting law, public records law, and some of the House members raised this issue, and we said, we actually agree. If the training was to include training on those two topics, that it should be, the Secretary of State's office would approve those portions of the training. We would not be the people who are developing it or owning it in any way. We'd just be including it in the overall training.
Yeah, so a municipality can say no to a FOIA request. No, they can't at all.
No.
Okay.
I'm not sure you can say no.
I think there is a way you can.
Unless there are things that are excluded, there are certain types of things that you can't, that are not subject to open, to the public records.
And
they're frivolous standards.
Well, we're gonna have, Lauren Hibbert from Secretary of State. I want to testify next, so.
Address that quiet under the screen. You might
Yes,
not
thank you.
I would never say their name if I was just sitting there.
All right. Well,
All right, why don't we wait, actually, Senator Bihowski has a question that we're gonna let Christina finish so we can get to our next witnesses. And we'll have Christina back as many times as we need to. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so Senator White, I certainly have seen some of the things that you've been talking about as well, FOIA requests, and I think what it's pointing to is a lack of public trust.
Yeah.
And in my view, creating a unified standard that people meet helps to build trust, and being able to access those advisory opinions does as well, being able to say like, no, the Ethics Commission says this is ethical. So I think that we've seen it all across government and the public generally, is there's just this growing lack of trust. And I think what I'm hearing from Christine's testimony is they're experiencing that and wanting to respond in a way that builds trust. The question I have for you is, I'm not sure if you are aware, we put an open meeting law training requirement in S55. And so I don't want to be duplicative. So I want to make sure that you would be okay if we either merged those together or took that out of here because we already did it somewhere else.
That's in the past, yeah.
Well, as we discussed yesterday, I know I'm not too concerned.
I'm not either, but it isn't yet law.
Yes. But I don't want to create duplicative requirements.
We'll make sure the bill's in line, just like we are with the other bill that's.
Bills need to be in sync.
Okay, carry on, Christina. I want to make sure you
Okay.
have a chance to finish your
All right.
opening remarks here.
Okay, moving through supplemental ethics policies as tracks the state code of ethics. You can have supplemental ethics policies, like so if an issue is not addressed in the municipal code of ethics, you can, address it separately. You can create a higher standard but not a lower standard. The role of the Ethics Commission is to provide advice upon request, it's confidential, and it only relates to officers' own conduct. So it can't be a member of the public asking if the conduct of a municipal officer or specific conduct is unethical unless they're asking in the context of a complaint. Want to file a complaint, this is the facts, can we discuss it like that? We can say, yes, that would make a valid, a valid basis for an ethics complaint, or no, it wouldn't. So we can discuss it in that context. We don't provide advisory opinions or things like that to members of the public. Training, we would develop free and provide free online and in-person training to municipal officers on the municipal code of ethics. And I think there was an addition, we would also provide training or advice on how to investigate and resolve complaints. So that we look at doing something similar, having some resources on investigating complaints. And so when it comes to training, so we would provide the free training for anyone who wants it. That does not mean that municipalities can't provide their own training. If they want to develop their own training, if they already have an ethics training in place, they would just need to incorporate what is now in the new, state municipal code of ethics into that training. And we ask that they show it to us first, just so we can make sure there's no misinformation or there's no conflict between the trainings in the sense that people are getting different advice. So that should be an easy process. Basically, we just want to look at it and say, yeah, okay, looks good. And enforcement municipalities are responsible for designating a person or body to receive ethics complaints. We're assuming that people are going to incorporate that into their existing complaint processes, and they need to keep records of that moving forward in accordance with their own record retention policies. So I do assume that people have record retention policies.
We had that discussion after that 35 as well.
Yeah, and I will just say in terms of record retention, so like right now that I have personal experience with this, obviously, because we handle like training, tracking, for anyone who doesn't have access to the state system, has caps. And so that would be hundreds of boards, members of boards and commissions. So anyone who takes the training through our website, there's an automatic email that's generated. We get their name, we get their agency, we get the date, we just put it on the spreadsheet, and that's what we do. We also create a training certificate for them, so we just keep that in a folder. So I'd say it takes approximately 90 seconds. Okay, so that is the quick summary, and so I feel like I'm taking up. So
No, this is great. This is a really good introduction to the bill. And do you have anything that you want to add about the section that's the more state level stuff? And you focus mostly on or solely on the municipal sections of the bill?
I was focusing on that today. I think when we're looking at the state sections, I think there are a couple of things we heard yesterday that we just wanted to be able to address. I think one is there was a change from the last version of this bill that I saw to the one that's being considered now. I don't know where it came from. And that's under financial disclosure. So county assistant judges and probate judges candidates for those offices, they were included previously. And the last version of the bill I saw, we had the discussion, they were removed. We don't agree with the removal. We don't see any reason for it.
Removal, you mean, or for
For exempting them from financial disclosure requirements. So if it's gonna apply to all county officials, it should include probate judges and it should include assistant judges. So we don't see a reason for that exemption. I know that I just jumped over to a different.
You're speeding along there, like you're fast. Aren't the judges all under the judicial conduct code?
So we're talking just about financial disclosure requirements.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed that part.
Yeah, and so we're talking about that, and we're also talking about assistant judges and probate judges who are candidates, so they're not within the judicial system yet.
And then once they're elected, everybody, states attorneys, probate judges, everybody.
Well, that's the question. Yeah.
So Christina, on page 5 of the bill, there is at the very bottom of, as passed by the House, there's a definition of county office.
Yep.
And it does include assistant judges.
And
So
then
where is it excluded? Where are they excluded?
there is a definition of county officer that specifically excludes that. So.
So there's a difference between the county office, there's no county officer identified.
It is in here.
Oh, yes. It says county officer means an individual holding the office of high bailiff or state's attorney. But that's
Page 8. at the
Yeah,
top.
my wondering there is that if that is because once they become the county officer, they have been elected and those judges would now be under the judiciary.
So we have, so there's, yeah. So in this proposal, when it comes to financial disclosures, So there's the requirement when someone is a candidate and there's a requirement when someone is in office. And so right now, we have it in here that when you are a candidate, I believe that they went back and they excluded, judges, assistant and judges and probate judges. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but right now we have it that county officers have to file with the executive officers, but they would be county, probate judges and assistant judges would be excluded from that category. And so we also don't agree with that. So there is, a requirement that, the judiciary does have its own, financial disclosures, just like the legislature, right? So you're a candidate, you file candidate financial disclosures, and the legislature has its own separate one. However, this has been in the news recently, right? So there was an article recently in Vermont Digger because 50% of the judges, and this is a growing number over time, when they file their financial disclosures internally, are just checking they have nothing to report. And so that's, yes, that is an issue. And in 2022, I believe it was Center for Public Integrity gave Vermont specifically judicial branch financial disclosures and asked. So that is recent. So we don't want to not address that issue when we are addressing it for other people. I think it should just be the same standard. So there's regulating someone as a judge and then there's regulating somebody as a county officer. So people can inhabit two roles.
Okay. Yeah, I think it might be the top of page 8, and that doesn't include sheriffs because.
Yeah, sheriffs are not listed here, but they already have the requirement, as of last year, they're included under executive officers.
Yeah, but they should be
asked our
here.
We'll ask. Drafted attorney. What?
I think they were left out because it's already clear that they have to file one.
Okay. We'll make sure. All right.
It's okay, we include people.
What? Anything else, Christina?
Yes, I do want to be conscious of time, so I did have the opportunity to listen to some of the session from the other day, and I think there was a question about whether if the Ethics Commission were taking complaints, if it would be setting up a parallel system. So TJ is prepared to talk about that, if that's something you want to talk about today. If not, I think we'll available for future discussion.
Yeah, that is something I do want to talk about. I'm not sure we have the time to talk about it today,
Because
but
we talked about that, because everywhere else you delegate, so if a complaint comes in about us, it gets sent to the appropriate body that deals with it. And yeah, I guess my one question before we let you go is about your positions.
Yeah.
Because we're having to do serious active advocacy on every dollar that we are asking for.
Yes, so, so there's what we think that we can move forward with all of the work that is anticipated by this bill, if we have a minimum of one additional full-time person for the staff council. My understanding is they did strip the positions out of the bill. There's originally, a question about creating 3 full-time positions. We have our ideal, we have what we thought was likely, and we have our minimum. So our minimum would be 1 additional person, 1 staff council person, and if there could be some additional money, even if it's just $10,000 to help pay for outside consultants like TJ to help with additional work, then that would be fantastic. My understanding is that, it didn't make it through the House because it's a last-minute discussion, and my understanding that it is an ongoing discussion.
okay, so that you don't think there's any positions in the House budget for you?
My understanding is that it's an ongoing discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we're the reason we
We're part
want
of
to nail it down is because we are writing a memo this
Okay.
afternoon
Okay.
to our appropriations committee.
Okay,
So we have you on our list
Okay.
as, so I believe you requested 3 positions.
Yeah.
And I thought there was 1 included in the House budget, but you don't think it made it in there?
I think they took it out. I can tell you that's what we had thought. I can tell you what our ideal is.
We
We're doing ideals and then our minimum.
Yeah.
Our idea would be to have the equivalent of 3-time positions. I would like to remain part-time, I have another job, the commission wants me to stay on for at least another year or 2 to see everything through.
Oh.
We have a part-time assistant, I think that is fine for the part-time assistant. If we take on all of the work that is in this bill, ideally, we would have the equivalent of 3-time positions. We'd have a staff attorney, we'd have a staff counsel, part-time executive director, part-time assistant. If we're going forward with a minimum of what I think we can do, we can make it with 1 staff counsel and hopefully some additional money to pay for consultants like TJ who can help absorb some.
Okay, so you're asking for 1 additional position. Okay.
1
And-
full-time position.
And
So
money
you did
for
not
consultants.
request 3 position?
That was what was in the original bill.
Oh, I see, okay.
But our understanding is that is now a pipe dream, so I'm saying what our minimum is would be one staff council.
So, but it sounds like you don't wanna become full-time. Even if,
Not now.
even if we financed it.
Okay,
Okay, and your assistant wants to say part-time, and you
It's-
just need $10 or $20,000 to hire consultants.
That's the minimum that we think we can work with, so.
What's,
The ideal would be if we could have one staff attorney and we could have one staff counsel. The staff counsel would, we have a list of responsibilities that we do, but we'd have one staff attorney. We would like to dedicate to training, right? And so that would include physical training, because we would like to provide on-site training for people. That's not something we can do now. So they would be, the staff attorney would be helping with training, they would be helping with, everything that comes in the office, resource development. The staff counsel will be more of a person that's kind of overseeing complaints and investigations and really delving into that process. And then my position would remain part-time, and I would really focus on legislation. And I would do everything that I do now, but the way our office is that we had, a number of people working full-time, we could find the work for everyone. So it's kind of a constant, like, how do we triage this? So the ideal would be full-time staff attorney, full-time staff counsel, lead the part-time administrative assistant, part-time executive director. If we can't have that one full-time staff counsel, we can make it work.
and some extra money for these consultants.
for consultants, okay, that's helpful, so we can include it in
that's
our
very
budget memo. Okay. We will certainly have you back to talk more, and TJ, thank you for hanging up here. We will probably want to have you come back as well.
already have on my list.
Yeah, we already had you on our list, for coming back, so thank you very much. I do want to be conscious of time and turn to Lauren, because I know she has to head out, so, thanks, Christina. Hi, it's nice to see
Moving
you.
this forward.
For the record,
Go ahead.
Deputy Secretary of State, the not quiet lady underneath the TV.
No, it was my ring light, and I apologize.
We don't have to escalate more.
No.
Accidents happen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us here to testify about the ethics bill. For the most part, the Secretary of State's office supports this bill, the incentives behind this bill. We have some questions. And I will go fast, and I appreciate the fact that you're accommodating me, because I have another engagement at 3:30, so I'm trying to do both at the same time. So I'm walking through the bill summary document.
The one from Tim or the one from Christine?
The one from Tim. Sorry about that.
No, just need to know which one we're doing.
And if I don't mention something, then I have no concerns or questions. I'll just note that on page 3, there's an amendment to section 2, the definitions, which expressly includes me as somebody who needs to do financial disclosures. I appreciate this clarity and fully embrace this, but I just thought since it's something, as I was reading along, that would directly impact me as an individual, I thought I should express my support for it.
Number 7 on page 3.
Page 3, I'm looking at the bill summary, page 3, section 2, amendment to 3 VSA 1201 definitions.
Bill summary.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, it's me, not you.
The public service one?
It changed the definition.
It changes it. Previously, my role, the deputy role for all separately electeds was silent. And we were interpreting it differently, and because it was silent, and this expressly includes us as executive officers. There are ramifications for being including restrictions on my future employment, lots of things. But given my role and the duties that I have, I think it's appropriate that I provide financial disclosures. So, I'm happy to clarify.
What's up that section 5? That's right here. Okay, so. Oh, yeah, I got it, okay, sorry, I just couldn't find all the section 2 parts.
All right, carry on.
Sorry, just my bad.
Wait, did you introduce yourself for the?
I did,
Okay,
I did,
sorry.
but not so quietly under the
Yeah,
TV.
under the
Right, okay, yeah.
Under the screen.
Okay, carry on.
I'm now on page 6, part 10, the municipal ethics. I think that's really where the majority of the change is happening in this bill. We support the creation of a standard statewide code of municipal ethics. Our office receives municipal complaints. It's sometimes hard, depending on the municipality, to find the code of ethics that they have adopted. They can differ when we are researching it and providing guidance to somebody on how to make a complaint. There is not, it's not standardized. I think we would work with the ethics commission to get the list of people that the towns have identified as the person who receives the ethics complaints, so that we can also provide that service to the public, so that the public, we can refer somebody to the person. And I'm confident that the ethics commission would be okay with us getting that, but that's something that we would also have an interest in, because we do receive a significant number of complaints about municipalities.
So, may I just ask a question there? So what's the avenue for those complaints? I mean, you don't have a complaint portal for municipal.
We do not.
So how do you receive those?
We receive them by email and phone. We have a staff person, Jenny Prosser, who is primarily responsible for responding to these inquiries. We cannot give legal advice. We are not anybody's counsel. But what happens right now is the clerks are represented by the Clerks Association, the treasurer is the same. The towns by the LCT and the public by. And so they call us to get advice on what is the law, what's the requirement, does this sound weird? And we try to advise on what is the law, what's expected, and not comment on does this sound weird, right? Because we don't, with that line between giving people information and getting legal advice, it can be tricky. And we can't give people advice because we don't represent them, and nor do we want to. So we receive complaints, we tally them, and we do receive them.
Who do you send them to?
Who do we send them to?
I mean, you tally them.
We tally, we provide advice about what is the law. We receive complaints about code of ethics, we receive complaints about open meeting, and we receive complaints about public record. And we provide the law back to people on how to remedy that.
I got that, but the rest of the complaints, who do you send them to? There is nobody except.
Nobody, we
But
can appoint
ethics
you that
commission.
nobody.
We tell the
Right.
person how to advocate for themselves.
Okay, so you don't, now that we have an ethics commission, you don't just send them all to Christina?
Well, not if it's a municipal issue.
They don't have the authority to deal with this.
Well, you can send them anywhere you want. I mean, you could send the complaint to the
I
ethics
do
commission.
believe that we tell folks you can report this to the
Yeah,
ethics
okay.
commission, but but again, that is for municipal issues.
That's the problem we're solving.
Well, that's a piece that I don't think this bill fully solves. And so this, I mean, this is I think this bill is a better state than where we are now, but that doesn't solve the issue. Because our office isn't going to investigate municipal ethics complaints. The ethics commission is not going to investigate municipal ethics complaints. And so we're sending people back to the town, which can be problematic. And so can be good too. I mean, I think there's both. So just to be clear, it can be both.
The issue of enforcement and investigation is still a fight.
For me, it's a very big question. Because I think the creation of a statewide code is essential, creates uniformity, creates a general understanding, general expectation. It provides clarity for folks like in my office who are providing advice. That's good. But the investigation and reconciliation of complaints done at the municipal level. I understand why this bill is in this place.
Yes.
But it could be really problematic and frequently is when we talk about open meeting and records issues, because that's the way the bills are structured on those as well, until someone has frustrated the process and there's an appeal
Right.
to Superior Court. So with open meeting or public records, if there's a violation and the body doesn't cure, then the body is sued.
Yeah,
There's not a right of action here, that at least to my understanding. And there's not an external body who's reviewing the conduct. So, I mean, I think this is a large step forward. And I don't want this,
But we're
you
still
guys to
not
hear this, but I don't think it's
enough.
solving the issue it's not the final. This is, the way I like to think of anything is, this is the start. And it's gonna keep going, and I'm not gonna use my trajectory analogy in front of my son's physics teacher, but, you know, but it's just, it's the beginning. And it doesn't have to solve everything, nor should it probably, because it's the beginning.
Right, but maybe Anne could calculate how long it'll take to get there.
No. Given enough initial conditions.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Other material bodies in the stratosphere.
Exactly.
Yes, Spencer, the hostie.
So I hear you that this is a step forward, but I'm also hearing you that there are some problematic spaces where we may need to shore it up or go a little further. So I'm wondering if there are specific areas where we could close some of those holes now to set us up for a better trajectory going forward.
Set us up for the next couple of years.
Yeah, well, and I too have concern around enforcement and investigation, but maybe that's not where it's at. So I just want to hear from you, like, what are the holes we
So I have two concerns. I think both are somewhat solvable and somewhat need to be solved in the future once this is in place. So one is who investigates how and with what training. And with what training goes into my second concern, which is, but let me just stay on enforcement. I'm on page 7, section 19.
Still on the sum.
Still on the summary. I can go into the bill if you'd like, but page 7, 1996, enforcement and remedies. This section of the law is pretty bare bones, and I think allows a lot to be designated by town. And I believe this section is effective on passage. Yes, this section is effective on passage. So that's a pretty quick turnaround time for towns to figure out who's gonna be investigating and how. Definitely agree that this should be posted. I mean, that's not the problem. The problem is just the logistics of how towns are going to designate who's going to investigate complaints and how they're gonna be done upon passage of this, with this structure that's currently in the statute. That's a big topic. The second is, and this is maybe it was intentional by the House. I have to say that I probably should have dived into this bill a bit more on the House side. So if you look at section 23, which is the session law about initial ethics training for in-office municipal officers, that is the session law that requires 2 hours of ethics training by May 1st of 2025, which can be in person or online. The training will also include information on the state's open meeting law and the state's Public Records Act, which shall be approved by our office. The sort of the fleshing out of what's in the training is in the session law, but I don't see it in section 1995, the ethics training. So I think it's a policy decision on whether or not ethics training for the foreseeable future as an ongoing requirement will require open meeting law training and state Public Records Act training. I will say that the ethics code, training on ethics code will be very important. Training on open meeting law and public records is also important. S55 has the open meeting law training for chairs. This is a much wider net of who's required. This bill encapsulates a lot of people. So encompasses the word I wanted, not encapsulate, so it encompasses a lot of people. And so my question really is policy decision. Do you want the ethics training to include those other two topics for the duration of time or just at the initial outset?
Question.
And I'll just say that when we receive complaints, the line between unethical conduct as defined in this bill and an open meeting law is like a dotted graphite pencil.
No, super fine.
So super fine, like the conflict of interest and an open meeting law violation frequently are very intertwined, tangled, because the conflict of interest is happening in not an open meeting and there's not enough public records about it. So all of these issues are intertwined. So I say this all to suggest that I think the training, I would be interested in talking about this more with folks because I think it's a bigger piece than this bill sometimes contemplates. And when the Secretary of State does a training on open meeting law or public records, we just did one for the School Board Association in the fall, which was very nice of them to invite us. That was a 2.5 hour training with people coming and asking us questions afterwards. So it's not a small thing and it's nuanced. And I just want to make sure that, particularly for my office, that we're very clear on what's expected of us, that we're providing the right level of training. If this is just a statutory regurgitation, I agree, that can be in half an hour because I can read the statutes in half an hour. If we're talking about examples and applying it to life, which is what people want and need. From my perspective, it's a much more in-depth, and I understand the pressures on the Ethics Commission on not being able to do that in-depth training for everybody. I mean, I hear the point very well. We can't go out and do in-person trainings on the open meeting law and public records either. For everybody in the state. So there needs to be some efficiencies of scale, but I just think, and maybe it's just that I like to under promise and overperform. You know, I just think we need to really understand what we're signing on for, all of us, the LCT, the Ethics Commission, the Secretary of State, and make sure that we can do it in the timeline that is required within this bill. And the timeline is a bit of a concern for me, depending on the scope of the expectation.
Okay. All right, Senator White.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Even as you're saying that, my thought process was, I would really like the robust training with examples. And in part because I think the point of the training is proactive prevention of
Yes.
violation. So I feel like I want to put my money up front versus down the line on this topic. So I did just want to make one other point, which is I think often there are situations where there may be violations, but there are also situations where people overcompensate, believing they have a conflict of interest when in reality they do not. And it is hard, like I've had members of our select board who won't vote in a meeting on whether or not they should be chair or vice chair because they believe it is a conflict of interest for them to vote on a position that they are running for. And like, that's a very obvious, like, that's not what we're talking about.
Wait, when you ran for office, I hope you voted for
I
yourself.
voted for myself. So I do, so there's kind of these myths. And I think there's actually some overcompensation or over concern at times. So I think that could be, I want to just note that as this training happens, I think you'll also be giving a little bit more ability for people to understand what that terminology means. So I think I'm hearing you say you want a change in the definition piece and you
Well,
want
I think
clarity.
I would
or is
like-
this-
I would like
Or you want-
clarity on whether the ethics training as outlined in section 1995 should also include open meeting and public records. And the thing that I will say is just those are very intertwined topics. It's very hard to untangle them in the real world. If you're talking about the statutes and the definitions, it's pretty easy to keep them separate. But as soon as you apply it in a scenario, they're very intertwined.
Yes.
And, you know, I wanna be very respectful of the fact that there are many bodies that are providing those trainings right now. So, you know, the Secretary of State's not the only group, VLCT is not the only group, but, and I think the training is good. But it's just it's a little bit more of a kaleidoscope of landscape in terms of who's providing what training and how and what's being covered. And this adds another piece that, I believe is good, but the timing of it and some of the logistics of it, I have questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Senator Yoski.
That is really helpful, and I don't know that you were in the room yet when we did flag the S-55 and how it's not quite harmonized with this language, and we do have a desire to harmonize it as well. Cause I too noticed that, and I guess, and feel free to tell me that you don't know yet, but I guess I wonder what your preference is to have them all held together or to have public record and ethics as sort of separate training entities.
Well, so in S-55, the open meeting is just for the chairs. And so for all training, what you're talking about is people's time. And that's supposed to be people's money, but that is certainly always people's time. So, I think every public official should learn about public records.
Yeah.
I think if you're on a public body, it's good to learn about open meeting, even if you're not the chair, because what if you disagree with the chair, or what if you want to run for chair? It can feel overwhelming if you aren't trained on it. So whether they're all combined, I would wanna, I think what I'm asking for is maybe a little bit of time to talk with Ted and Christina about this specific question. How do we move forward on training? What's a realistic time frame? Do we want them to be intermingled? Do we want them to be separate? What are the positives, negatives? I'm not sure that the three of us would agree. But I'd like an opportunity to talk about it because I think these are, you know, the way this bill is, I think it could pass right now, maybe, but could pass right now and
Still have these
I
questions.
still have these questions and I just like to have some answers to the questions before the bill passes.
Yeah, I completely agree, and anything that we can get the players to agree on beforehand and be like, this will work for me, we try to do that, as you know, all the time. So, it's there, do you need to go?
You need to.
Okay, did you submit written testimony?
I don't know.
Would
I
you,
can try.
if you can, but also, if you can talk with, Ted and Christina and whoever else about the training and what you think is reasonable, because also the timeline, if this takes effect on passage, that's not enough time to get this.
Well, what I think the training, just to be clear, is required by May 1st of 2025. The piece that I'm concerned about is the investigation and who does the investigation is effective on passage.
Okay,
And I think that, I don't speak for municipalities, but that's a pretty tight timeline to get figured out. Particularly if you haven't received training about what is required in
Right.
investigation, so,
exactly, that's a fair point. Okay, well, we can have you back
Thank you
as
very
well,
much.
thank you very much, really appreciate it. People are moving around, so what's going on?
Madam Chair, I have a 10-minute meeting I have to take at 3:30, and I thought we were gonna have a break at 3:30.
Yeah, Ted, can you stick, okay.
Thank you,
We're,
Ted.
we are gonna take a break, and I think that people have a couple of
Chris,
things,
I
but
have
try
to
to
speak
be
with
back
you
in
if I
10
may.
minutes, okay? 10 minutes,
Thank